Welcome to today's podcast. My name is Pearlie Brewer, and I will be your host. Today's podcast guest is Dr. Matthew Hallowell. Dr. Hallowell is President Teaching Scholar and Endowed Professor of Construction Engineering at the University of Colorado at Boulder. He earned his BS and MS in Civil Engineering and a PhD with a focus on Construction Engineering and Occupational Safety and Health. Before his academic career, he worked in construction as a laborer, project engineer, and quality inspector. Dr. Hallowell specializes in construction safety research with an emphasis on the science of safety. He has published over 100 peer-reviewed journal articles on energy-based hazard recognition, safety leading indicators, safety risk assessment, predictive analytics, and precursor analysis. For his research, he has received the National Science Foundation Career Award, the inaugural Thomas F. Farrell II Safety Leadership and Innovation Award, and the Construction Industry Institute Outstanding Researcher Award. Quite the achievements, Dr. Hallowell. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Pearlie.
And the reason I went to the sort of your background is to give folks a sense of your background, because it's certainly again very, very impressive. You mentioned a number of peer-reviewed journal articles that you've written over the last few years, which I know is big in the university environment. Maybe just to sort of set the tone before we get into artificial intelligence. Do you have two or three of those, and maybe you could talk about what you researched?
Yeah, sure. The research is all focused in occupational safety. That's my area. But one of the cool things about safety research is that it is a multifaceted problem. So there's a lot to learn in terms of, numerical things like risk analysis, or even psychological things like how people recognize hazards, evaluate risk, and make decisions. So my research portfolio is quite broad, and I get to work with everybody from folks in the business school to folks in psychology and neuroscience. And kind of my specialty in there is applying those scientific concepts to the problem of worker safety. So I think we have big opportunities to make scientific advancements in the field, and safety is a very interesting area to research because of this multifaceted nature. It keeps me on my toes, and I get to study a lot of things. Probably the research that I'm best known for in the professional arena is on hazard recognition and the use of the concepts of energy to help people see more hazards, identify which hazards have that life-threatening potential, and how to control that energy to save lives. So, working on things like the energy wheel to help people, recognize types of hazards that they would normally overlook by their natural biological limitation. That's one example of some of the work I've done. And then another more recent piece of work is extending that theory and using the concept of energy to help us identify which hazards have that life-threatening potential. So, for example, we found that the human body can withstand about 1,500 joules of energy, to get precise with you. And over that limit, that's when a life-ending, life-threatening, or life-altering outcome becomes most likely, not just possible any longer, but most likely. So I try to take, kind of some of these old problems that we've had in the industry for a long time and put some newer research to it and bring some knowledge we have from physics and medicine and psychology and business and so forth into our domain.
So let's dive into our main topic then, artificial intelligence. Why did you start researching this topic?
Yeah, so AI, most people actually that I know in the industry don't really know that I study AI. It's in vogue right now, so everybody and their brother seems to be studying AI or developing little AI widgets. But my work in AI actually started at the very beginning of my time as a professor here at the University of Colorado 16 years ago. My PhD work was in risk assessment, so I was getting into the quantitative side of safety. And as I was a new academic and looking at upping the rigor of my research and writing, proposals to the National Science Foundation, for example, that's where I started to delve into more sophisticated methods, in collaboration with some of my now close colleagues and friends, who did a lot more advanced data analysis than we typically see in the safety domain. So, for example, a colleague of mine, Balaji Rajagopalan, he's a climate researcher. He's in our water resources group. And so he and I collaborated to start to bring some of those concepts, of more sophisticated analysis into safety as it applies to making predictions and assessing risk. So I really started getting into the domain of AI for safety back in, just before 2010. That's where I was doing my initial work. And it built from there. I had a couple of fantastic PhD students, one of whom I still work with, Antoine Tichet. He and I are working on AI together now from a business standpoint. And so the trajectory has always been bubbling under the surface. It's been a quiet part of my research. So the academics were very interested in this. Academic researchers were interested in AI. The industry, I think, was still trying to make sense of what AI was for the last 15 years. And then all of a sudden, in the last couple of years, kind of post-COVID with ChatGPT and other forms of generative AI becoming popular in the common, everyday use, all of a sudden, the interest in AI has exploded. And so the research that we've been doing for a long time is now in the spotlight, even though that's not necessarily the kind of research that we were known for traditionally in the professional domain.
So what exactly is AI? I know we hear the term used so much, but what is it from a point of view of your perspective?
Yeah, so AI it's a really broad term. Sometimes we use it to describe all sorts of different things. I think, a lot of folks think of AI as, Terminator and some of these other things that we had seen for a long time. I guess the best definition I can give you is AI is the simulation or replication of human intelligence in a computer. So it could be something, we use our senses, for example, use our sight to be able to make sense of visual patterns in our environment. That's how we navigate our world, right? We might listen for things and kind of take the vibrations in the air and convert it into text in our brain and then understand it and communicate those back through other vibrations, right? Even, making, again, predictions, using the information in our environment to take that all in, make a prediction of what might happen if we take a particular action and make a decision. The cool thing is that AI has these different facets. So there isn't just one type of AI. It could range from what we'll call computer vision. That's essentially teaching computers to use a camera and see their environment, right? Make sense of the things that are around you. There are good common examples of that. Self-driving cars are an example. They're using visual input and making sense of that and using it to make decisions. If you drive through the tollway and you use that license plate toll option, it's reading your license plate using the computer, just like a set of human eyes would have had to do in the past. So those are a couple of basic, driving examples of computer vision. We're putting that into robots and other things. When I say we, I'm not doing that, but people are doing that, so that they can navigate their world. But AI is more than just that. It could be voice to text that you might have on your phone. That's AI taking, the speech vibrations and converting it into text. And then you have natural language processing, which is taking that text and making sense of the patterns, essentially reading it, right? You can hear it, but then do you read and understand it? So it's my long way of answering a good question, a good simple question, is that, I think of AI as the technological tools we have that computers, run that help replicate human intelligence. And sometimes they do a better job than we do, and sometimes worse.
So you've been at this for a while. What have you come up with in regards to use of artificial intelligence as it relates to occupational health and safety?
Oh, it's a good question. A lot. I'll tell you where I started, because I think that might be the most, the best place to start anyhow. So back in 2010, I was looking at using different types of information to make predictions of what might happen on job sites as it relates to safety. For example, if we've got a work situation, what's the most likely severity of the injury? What type of body part would be injured? What energy source might be involved in that injury, and so on. Okay, so I wanted to take information and be able to make predictions that would tell us, for given work scenarios, which one's the riskiest and why and what might happen. So in the past, we did that based on tasks. We'd say, all right, this particular task, like working on a roof, installing solar panels. All right, let's just take that as an example. And we'd just say, well, what's the risk of installing solar panels? But what we realize is, this makes intuitive sense. It's not just about the task name. It's really about the context that people are in. So is it snowing or is it a nice sunny day? Are you working a sloped roof or a flat roof? Is the system energized or de-energized? All of those things really drive the how risky a job operation is, not just the name of the task. So what we were looking at is saying, well, can we take a different approach at this? Can we use some of those, genome approaches? Like, can we break work down into its fundamental pieces, like, working surface and weather and the types of materials and the hand tools we're using and so forth, instead of labeling by task? And what we found is we could do that, and we could use injury reports and observations to gather that data, because they usually have, are you using a ladder, or, they'll have that information written in text. But here's the problem. It takes a really long time to read all of that, and that's a horribly boring task. Nobody wants to do it. So we needed a more sophisticated way to pore over hundreds of thousands of these injury reports and observations that we had. And that's where we used natural language processing. So instead of having a person read a million reports, literally a million reports, what we would do is read some and write a set of linguistic rules that say when those features of the work are present. So ladder's a good example because, ladder is kind of obvious. We use the term ladder. But other things are a little more subtle. Like, if I'm using, you have to kind of infer from the text what's going on. So we essentially trained a computer by writing all of these rules that would help the computer to read for us. So instead of us identifying all these attributes, the computer would do it for us, and we would check it and then tune the model and make it better until it was outperforming even us. And so that was our first foray. So now, for example, I don't need to read an injury report or an observation. I can use the natural language processing tool to read all of it. So you could imagine from a business perspective, that's good because companies are having, tens or hundreds of thousands of these, and nobody has the time to read them all and make sense of it, but a computer does, and it can do it in seconds. So that's a good example of AI, and where we started is training the computer to do a human task of reading that we don't have time to do, we don't want to do, and we're really not good at doing it. And so from there, we had a quantitative data set, and then we could make predictions using, machine learning and some other techniques. More recently, we've been getting into computer vision and training a computer to take a photograph or a video and automatically recognizing all the energy sources, hazards, if you will, in the work environment and assessing the extent to which those energy sources are controlled or uncontrolled. So you could imagine the future being, as these models mature, that you could have an eye in the sky, if you will, or use cameras on equipment or what have you to alert people when there's a change in a hazard or there's a missing control or what have you. Give us information because we don't have eyes on the back of our head. We can't do our work and look around us at all times. So, that's kind of where we came from, where we're going. But AI is something that I think is going to be a collaborator for humans in the future. In the near future.
Now, have you had the opportunity to test this out in the actual workplace?
Oh, yeah. So all of the work that we do on the AI side now is done in collaboration with industry. So early, it's like any other academic, I'm boiling up ideas in my office at the university, but we have an AI council, a safety AI council. This is a group of companies that work with us to ask good questions, drive what direction we should be going in terms of what sort of AI tools are needed. And then they go and try it out, pilot it. We see what works, what doesn't work, and we keep making the models better. So everything we're doing now is collaborative in nature. I'll give you an example. Since I mentioned natural language processing in detail, another application we use it in is to make sense of a pre-job safety brief, or a toolbox talk, or tailgate talk, whatever you call it, the meeting that happens before the work begins. And right now, the old way, or the still existing way of doing that, is to have a meeting and then somebody has to fill out all that paperwork, which who wants to do that, right? The real purpose of the meeting is to have a good meeting, right? The paperwork's a byproduct, not the purpose of the meeting. So we use natural language processing. We use voice to text to listen to the meeting, and we use natural language processing to take the meeting and automatically complete the paperwork. So it can save big companies 100,000 hours a year, easy. So it's just another example, but it's all happening in industry, because otherwise we produce stuff we don't know if it works. And so the first half of developing AI is creating it. The second half is testing it. And sometimes people don't do the second half all that well. They just create stuff and say, buy it. But that's not the best.
So what kinds of companies are in this group that you just talked about?
Yes,
not individual names, just companies, kinds of companies, industries.
Yeah, so for sure, happy to describe that. We have an interesting combination of clients and contractors, which sometimes you'll have organizations that are client only or contractor only. This is a combination and collaboration of clients and contractors. So we have representation from oil and gas, especially midstream oil and gas pipeline types of projects. We have commercial building represented, heavy civil construction, electric utilities, electric and gas utilities. So we hit kind of some of the big players in construction. That's our main focus, construction as it's broadly defined. But both clients and contractor side of things. And that's nice because you get both perspectives boiled into one model.
So in them using this AI, what have they discovered that they find helps them the most?
Yeah, so I think this is really important, is that now that we're kind of in this brave new world of using AI, is that we're in an interesting time where the AI tools are working really well, far better than they have in the past, especially with this new generative AI like ChatGPT. All forms of AI have accelerated. The challenge is that most businesses don't know how to use it. So you get this shiny widget, it does really cool things, and then it's all about how you use it, right? So I'll give you an example. If you and I were to go out onto a job site and we were to look at a particular task and say, all right, our job from a safety perspective, let's look at the task, identify the hazards, and assess whether or not those hazards are controlled or not. Pretty basic, most important thing we'd probably do in a safety walk. If I were to use AI to do that scan for us, it would find some stuff. It'd make some mistakes. It would find some things that aren't there. Those are false alarms. It would miss some things that are there, just like a person would, right? So a person's not perfect. Neither is the AI. And what would happen if we were to do it that way is it would narrow our focus down to what the tool identified, and that would kind of limit what we were looking at. And then we kind of are trying to infuse our intelligence in there too. If we were to switch it though, instead of using the AI first, we use the AI second. So instead of, pulling out the phone or the tablet, you and I were to identify all the hazards that we could find. That's opening the aperture, if you will, to everything that we could identify. Now, that's not going to be everything. We're going to miss stuff, right? We know that. We've learned that from lots of field testing. Then, after we've identified everything we can, then we pull out the phone or tablet, take a picture or use a video, and see what the AI identifies to see if it found something that we missed. Then the sum is better, right? Now we've expanded and we've opened up instead of shrinking down. So you always want to take the human intelligence first, then the artificial intelligence, and not the other way around. And we find is work teams are much more effective when they use AI as a collaborator to check their work, and less effective than they were before if they try to use AI to do their work for them. So AI, in this particular example, is a great way of checking and augmenting human performance, not replacing it. And I think that that's the biggest thing we've learned is you can create these great tools. They'll never be perfect, and they should always be used as our collaborator, but not our replacement. Unless you're looking at something that it's extremely good at doing, and the task like reading a million injury reports doesn't really require that human component, right? It's a more rote task. So that's our biggest lesson learned, is about how the tools are used.
Now, you mentioned something a moment ago, and that is, a lot of these AI groups now that talk about whether it's chat, GDP, whatever, they say use it. Where does a person go? What would you recommend a person do that wants to learn how to use AI and how to use some of these applications?
Yeah,
Are education institutions, for example, getting into this?
Yeah, there are. I mean, this is more of a computer science than a safety topic. So it is very difficult to know where to start. Let's take ChatGPT as an example. So OpenAI creates this model. It far outperforms anything that anybody's wildest dreams that a large language model would do. And then pretty soon after, people were looking at how to use it. At this stage, I don't know that the place to start would be a university course or anything like that. Frankly, I don't know enough about what's available out there, even though I am a professor. That's a different discipline than my own. I'm in construction engineering, not in computer science. But I found that there are some really good podcasts out there, which coincidentally we're on a podcast, but there's a really good one that people will lead that, describe the use cases and, what's worked for them, what doesn't work for them. I think there's one called ChatGPT Experiment. That was one that resonated with me. And I think that that's an interesting way to start. The other thing is what's kind of wild about ChatGPT is that you can ask it. Sometimes people are, I got the prompt window. It's like I'm chatting with it. Where do I start? Start by asking it what it can do. Tell it what you want it to do and ask it how to use it. So, that's kind of a wild thing. Like normally we think of AI as like you got to be an expert user, but you can learn to use it from the AI itself. So just say, tell me what you can do for me.
Now, for someone that wants to find out more about the kind of research you're doing and to get involved in it or to find out what might be out there that might be helpful to their organization, what would you recommend?
So I lead two major research groups. One is the Safety AI Council. That's a really good place to start because, if you really are on this trajectory trying to look at AI, you want to see what's responsible use of AI, where is it going, how are other people using AI in successful ways in business for safety. This council is a really good opportunity because that's really what it's all about, is sharing ideas, providing direction of wouldn't it be cool if we could do this or that, and then the development team on my side goes and creates proof of concept tools that you can try and all of that. It's a really good way to learn and contribute and start getting involved. That's how we do our AI research now, and it is all in, like I said, in collaboration with industry. From the university side of things, I run a very large research institute called the Construction Safety Research Alliance, the CSRA. And the CSRA is a collaboration of about 110 different companies. And we do research on all sorts of things, from how do we identify and manage last minute change during work, to how do we declutter safety and get rid of some things. Those teams work on other types of research, and that's a really good organization to follow, because all of the research that group does, our group, is made freely available to members or non-members. So everything that's produced is made available for free. So the CSRA, if you look up the CSRA, that's a treasure trove of knowledge. So it kind of depends on what you're interested in. My life is kind of split into two. The Research Alliance is at the university. The AI Council is something outside of the university. Both are R&D focused, where the university work is more fundamental research and the AI work is more applied, of course, more development R&D. So yeah, those are the two facets, the two ways you can follow. The CSRA's Knowledge Center is a good place to start. You can attend the summit virtually for free. There's all sorts of opportunities in both of those areas.
So what's next for you in the area of AI? What are you looking at, say, the next year to even 3 years down the road?
Well, my colleague, Antoine, he focuses on the development of the new technology. So where most of our effort is going into is in this new tool called Chat Safety AI that packages together the computer vision, the predictive models we've worked on for a decade, the indexing of all sorts of regulations and other things into one tool. So he's focusing on how to make all of those tools more robust and easier for people to use. And my contribution now is largely focused on how to use AI. So I'm not the programmer. I provide more direction to what should we be studying and advancing. But my work now is really on training and workshops and working with industry to, determine and test what's the best way to use these new tools to create the outcomes that we're looking for, and where are the potential traps where we could be using AI in ways that are counterproductive or potentially even unethical without even knowing it. So I focus on use. My colleague Antoine focuses on development.
So your thoughts on AI to date and where you see it going as far as potential and as far as liabilities?
AI has made scary levels of progress recently. So I've been using ChatGPT as an example because I think it's the most prominent example. Well, I know it's the most prominent nowadays. 2 years ago, nobody had heard of it. Nobody knew what a large language model was, even though people have been working on these things for a very long time. The thing that's a little scary, kind of amazing and a little scary, is that ChatGPT and what's now GPT-4o was created simply by exposing those models to insane amounts of text. And all of a sudden it was able to do things it was never even programmed to do. So for example, a large language model is all about language. It's all about words. But ChatGPT can draw you a picture. It wasn't trained on pictures. It was trained on text. The fact that it can create an image, and a good one at that, is we're starting to get into borderline sentience, meaning it's thinking for itself and able to do some things it was never told to do. So I think in AI, I don't say this to scare people necessarily, but I think it's worth paying attention to, that the folks who made that large language model, that made ChatGPT, don't know why it works as well as it does. Scholars in computer science, we don't know how and why it matured the way that it did. We just know that we fed it text and then it was able to do stuff. So we're starting to lose a bit of that control in terms of AI doing just exactly what we tell it to, and that's it. And that can be a good thing and a bad thing. It can teach itself. It can get better. And if you ask some of the leaders in AI now, there's consensus that AI is going to be smarter than we are before long. It's not going to be able to reproduce all forms of human creativity and other things, but if you interact with ChatGPT, it can produce some pretty creative stuff. So it's going to be able to do some things that we can do better than we can do it. So people often say, look, the computer's only as good as the people that program it, right? That's not the case anymore. The computer can become smarter than the human who programmed it. And I think that's where we've hit that tipping point now. So AI is it's time to learn about what it is. It's time to learn how to use it. And the best kind of thing I can convey to people is AI can be a really good collaborator, and people who know how to use it are going to far outpace people who don't. So you got to become literate. It's like an engineer with a calculator, right? 40 years ago, all the engineers were complaining about calculators and how it was going to ruin everything. Now we use calculators and computers to do all forms of engineering. Still need the human intelligence to check it and know what inputs are the right or correct and how to interrogate the results. So think of AI as the new computer, and we really need to be good at using it and working with it. And that's, I think, the biggest opportunity. It's also the biggest risk. Because if you give a bad engineer a good calculator, they're going to produce more bad stuff even quicker. Right? But a good engineer with a good calculator is the ideal situation. So we need to think about how do we move into the situation where we have competent people using high quality AI and away from the situation of incompetent people using competent AI. That's actually more dangerous than not having AI, is incompetent people using it. So, we still have a role. We need to up that competence, but even if you are competent, it's time to learn about AI. It's going to make you better, faster.
So on a personal note or curiosity, how do you use ChatGPT?
I use it also.
What kind of
I give you all sorts. I'll give you one that I've been, all right. So I've been working on a book, and it's not on AI. It's on energy-based safety. And sometimes, as a writer, you have blind spots. Like you have idiosyncrasies. You say things the same way, or there's a section that's boring or whatever. Now, I don't use ChatGPT to do the writing for me. I'm a writer by profession, and I don't generally like the writing style that ChatGPT has as a default. But what I do sometimes is I will give it a chapter of a book that I wrote, and I say, what part of that chapter is boring? What part of that chapter are there idiosyncrasies? Am I saying the term focus on or something too many times where it's getting annoying? So it's kind of doing almost an editorial review for me or an alpha review of my work and giving me some feedback. Sometimes I'll ask it, do you think that this example I used will resonate with a professional audience? And it will tell me, nah, it's a bit too academic, right? You need to use an analogy or something like that. So I use it as a collaborator to check my work. I don't use it to do my work. But even as a writer, it's really good at helping you with things, especially if you're one of those people that maybe you're not the best writer, or if you write things and you're like, it's too long. How you write an email and you're like, nobody wants to read a page-long email. Give me the bullet points. You can ask ChatGPT, say, here's an email I'm going to send. Make it half as long without losing any of the content. So anyways, long way of saying I use it to check my work, make my work better. I don't use it to do my work for me because I'm in the creative space. That wouldn't work very well. But there are fun ways to use it too. Like first time I ever learned about ChatGPT, it was my wife's birthday, coincidentally, and I was like, hey, Robin, come check this out. And I told it, please write my wife a sweet and endearing birthday note. It has these couple of jokes in it or whatever. And I clicked send, and we both looked at what came out of it, and she's like, oh, that's way better than anything you'd ever write. So, that was my moment of, maybe it can help me be even better at a lot of different things.
Now, do you use it for your teaching in the classroom?
I do. So when lots of my colleagues complain about students using ChatGPT. And my philosophy on this is that we should encourage our students to use those tools, but we should encourage them to use them responsibly. And if we're, look, we're professors, we should be clever, right? And smart and clever, you'd think. Not always the case, but you'd think that we should be able to do that. So I'll give you an example of the way that I used it in my class this term. As we just learned about the energy wheel and energy-based safety, right? How to use the concept of energy to identify hazards and find the stuff that kills you. And what I asked my students to do is I said, all right, give ChatGPT this prompt. Summarize the energy wheel, blah, 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 right? So I said, just give it this prompt. And what I want you to do as the students is critique its response. You're a graduate student. You're the expert now at this stuff. ChatGPT is not going to get it all right. So grade it, critique it, work with it, right? And so I just flipped it on them. I want them to use ChatGPT, but I want them to see where the limits are. Where does it work well? Where does it not work well? How can they use it? How could they maybe use it in a way that's going to be worse than what they'd produce on their own? So yeah, I think it's got a place in the classroom. I don't use it to really create content for me, but I do use it on assignments. And I encourage my students to use it and cite how they used it. So I don't say, look, you're not going to get any more or less credit. I just care about your output. But I do want you to disclose to me how you used it. And I think that's the right way to be using it. Even in the profession, forget students. Professionals should do the same thing. If you write a LinkedIn post and you use ChatGPT to make it, first of all, anybody who knows ChatGPT will know that you did that, so you'll look like an idiot. And second is, you should say, these are ideas, or collaboration that I had with ChatGPT. Just note it at the bottom. And that way you don't look like a disingenuous fool to the people who do know what that output looks like as a standard.
Well, look, Dr. Hallowell, I'd like to thank you very much for taking the time today to talk to us. Extremely informative when it comes to AI and the potential for occupational health and safety. It's an area that's certainly up and coming. And, the big thing is that I think people do need to learn a lot more about it. We hear about it, but I don't think very many people probably really know about it and really do understand it, certainly to the level you do. So thank you very much. We appreciate you taking the time, and best of luck in your future research and work in the field of AI.
Thank you, Pearlie. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed my time with you.
So that's it for today's podcast. Stay safe. We will talk to you next week.